What's the most famous vibrator in the world? Go ahead and picture it. Bring up a vivid image in your mind. Maybe you're thinking of the rabbit, with its rotating shaft and fluttering bunny ears, made famous by an episode of Sex and the City way back when. Maybe you're thinking of the Sybian, that huge, hulking vibrator that Howard Stern used to invite guests to use on his show. Or maybe you've got a less dated reference in mind, like the Rose toy that went viral on TikTok and has been a bestseller ever since. I think you could make a case for any one of these vibes being the most famous one in the world. But if you ask me, there's only one product that's truly worthy of that title. I'm talking about a toy that's been around since 1968. A toy that's come up on Sex and the City and the Howard Stern Show and TikTok. I'm talking about the magic wand.
It was like the first vibrator that had its own Twitter feed. Twitter was a place that when somebody pulled out their magic wand and had a really good time, they would then tweet their orgasm.
This is Carol Queen, PhD, staff sexologist at Good Vibrations and curator of the Antique Vibrator Museum.
I saw many people basically just write ooh ah, and capital letters for as many characters as it would allow, and then they would hit send.
As much as I'd love to say that I first discovered the wand through legendary sex educators like Dr. Queen, or on an exploratory jaunt to my local sex shop, she's right. People love to post about their magic wands on social media, and I'm pretty sure that's how I first heard of it. Over the years, there have been Instagram hashtags, Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and yes, back when Twitter was still called Twitter, there were tweets. A lot of them. For me, all that hype was just the beginning of what would turn into an enduring fascination. It was hard not to wonder, what makes the magic wand so magic? This is Making Magic, a mini-series that'll take you on a deep dive into the history and legacy of this international superstar of the sex toy scene. I'm Kate Sloan, a sex journalist, podcaster, and maybe most crucially for this series, a total sex nerd. And I'll be your guide as we delve into the life and times of the magic wand.
So I have one in my bedroom. He has one in his bedroom. I mean, I need to have them everywhere. And I just don't use other stuff because it's always like I'm making an exception. And I think that says a lot about the product.
This is Hallie Lieberman, a sex toy historian, journalist, and author of Buzz, A Stimulating History of the Sex Toy.
I mean, I'm someone who's used every vibrator. Not every vibrator, that's a lie. I mean, a lot of vibrators out there. And I keep going back to this one. I almost feel guilty because people will be like, well, what's the new vibrator to use? And I'll be like, the magic wand. And people are like, really? And I'm like, yeah. Like, I'm sorry. If I'm just being honest, that's what I use.
Hallie's not alone in this. I've interviewed 35 people for this series, and it's been wild to see the degree to which some people pledge their allegiance to their magic wand. There are wand fanatics, wand evangelists, a legion of true believers in the magic wand. How many sex toys can you say that about?
You don't listen to the Who Weekly podcast, do you? Because they talk about who's and thems, which is like A-list and B-list. Like a celebrity, like them celebrity would be someone, your parents or grandparents would know about, like Tom Cruise. Who is anyone you would ask who afterwards. And that would be like Rita Ora, or that would be like Ice Spice or someone like that. Hitachi is a them, in one of the only thems of the sex toy world. So if you ask someone to name a brand vibrator, a lot of people aren't going to be able to do it. But if they are, they might say Hitachi, they might say Magic Wand. It's probably the only one that people have heard of.
She's right. The magic wand has brand recognition. It has a reputation. It has cachet. It's so renowned, in fact, that some users still call it the Hitachi, even though that name hasn't been on it for years. But we'll get to that. I bought my first magic wand online when I was 20 years old. I'd started a sex toy review blog called Girly Juice, thinking it would be a fun summer diversion, but toy reviewing had quickly become a major hobby for me, and eventually it would become my main gig. Since I was getting serious about sex toys, I knew I had to try the one that everyone talked about. The one I'd seen in a smattering of porn scenes, the one that heroes of mine had called the Cadillac of vibrators, a durable workhorse of pleasure, and the reigning champ of vibes. I didn't really understand the hype when I'd never held one in my own two hands. In porn I'd seen, the wand was loud, bulky, and obtrusive. With its big round head, glossy white body, and iconic blue button panel, the aesthetic of the wand seemed oddly clinical. Which makes sense, given that it was originally marketed as a body massager, but it didn't exactly scream sex to me.
Doesn't look sexy. It takes up a lot of space in your bag when you're traveling. All these things. There's all these things, reasons to not use it. And to me, that's the power of it, because it is like the least convenient vibrator I own, but it is the one I will take everywhere. And that kind of sums it up to me.
Back then, when I was 20, I knew that while a lot of people revered the magic wand's mega intense vibrations, many others found that they were way too strong, almost terrifyingly strong. But I was intrigued nonetheless, and knew that my chosen path of sex toy reviewing would require clitoral courage at times. So I ordered my first magic wand, and I waited, eager to find out what all the buzz was about.
I think once you use it, you get it, because it gives really, really strong orgasms very quickly. It is really easy to use and is made very well. It's hard to explain other than for me to say, try this at home. Like, you should try it and you should see.
This is Danielle Bezalel, creator and host of the Sex Ed with DB podcast, and a longtime magic wand devotee.
I remember the first time that I used a magic wand because the heavens opened. And then I remember using it and coming within like potentially 10 seconds and being like, holy shit, why have I never used this before?
In asking all my interviewees about their first magic wand memory, I've learned that a lot of people have this experience. The clouds part, angels sing, an inferno of pleasure sparks to life. And the wand immediately earns a spot in their top nightstand drawer, where it might stay for years, if not a decade or more. However, if I'm being honest, that wasn't my experience, at least not at first. And once again, I have the tweets to prove it. Okay, let's look at some of these old magic wand tweets. In June of 2012, when I was 20 years old, I tweeted, "It's weird that I don't have a Hitachi magic wand yet."
That is weird. Why didn't you have one then?
Yeah, I was, I guess, 3 months into sex toy reviewing when I wrote this. And even then, it seemed weird. Like, all the other sex toy reviewers had a magic wand. I was not on their level yet.
Right, yeah.
This is my spouse, MB, who is, like me, a sex nerd and a magic wand aficionado. Though they don't post about sex toys on social media quite as flagrantly as I do.
I'm trying to remember when I got mine. I don't have as many tweets about this kind of stuff in my archive that I could easily pull from.
I was in New York in late July 2012. I managed to convince my dad to take me to the Babeland in Soho. And I tweeted that morning, "Headed to Babeland. I'm determined to come home with a Hitachi." I immediately made a beeline for the vibrators and said to the salesperson, "I'm here to buy a magic wand." And they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We're actually out of them right now."
Yeah, that's wild. You had one job, Babeland.
Right. I really was not expecting that because it was so famous that I just figured they would have a ton of them. And then later I just ended up ordering a magic wand online. That was less than a month later because on August 7th, I tweeted, "I want my Hitachi, damn it." So I assume I had ordered it. And then, 2 days later, I wrote, "My Hitachi came in the mail a few hours ago and I tried it a bit and I am not impressed," all caps.
Wow. What do you remember from that first testing session? Do you have notes on it?
Here's MB reading part of the blog post I wrote when I'd owned my magic wand for about 2 weeks.
Zillions of people have reviewed the Hitachi Magic Wand. I'm sure you don't even care anymore. You know it's strong. You know it's ugly. You know that most people who try it love it, and you know there's a vocal minority who can't stand the damn thing. When the package arrived, I immediately took the Hitachi out of its hilariously G-rated box and plugged it in. I held it to my pubic mound, practically trembling in anticipation of its purported epic power, and turned it on. It was buzzy and high-pitched. It sounded like a food processor.
Yeah, I had tweeted that jerk-off session I referenced there. I wrote, exhausting jerk-off session finished. The Hitachi could not get the job done. Too buzzy. August 10th, I wrote, I finally got off with the Hitachi, but now I have no feeling in my clit. Spoiler alert, though, I eventually came around on the magic wand. I mean, obviously I did. I've made a whole podcast mini-series about the damn thing. You're listening to it right now. I can't say that me and the magic wand fell in love at first sight or at first orgasm the way it happens for some people, like Danielle. But one thing I do have in common with a lot of magic wand diehards, I've been the recipient of a surprising amount of unsolicited criticism on my wand usage, almost always from random men who imply or sometimes even outright say that using a large vibrator means I'm a sexual freak who could never be satisfied by a quote-unquote real man, as if either of those things is inherently a problem. The most hilarious example of this was when a far-right blogger who I'd never met or spoken to or heard of wrote an entire blog post about how uncomfortable he was with me being an openly sexual woman on the internet. The first sentence of that piece was, Kate Sloan is an example of what I mean when I say every feminist's ideal boyfriend is a Hitachi magic wand. To be clear, this is definitely one of those hashtag not all men situations. Almost all of the men I've been with were completely chill about my vibrator usage during sex or otherwise. Many even liked me to use it on them. And let's be real, it's not only men who can feel threatened by a sex toy. That being said, I've thought a lot about why some guys get their boxers in a bunch about women using vibrators. And I think a big part of it comes down to female autonomy.
The magic wand is like the device that we are using to liberate ourselves. You know, the idea that men have to provide us with sexual pleasure, that we can't do that on our own, which was so revolutionary. That goes back to the fear that women are going to abandon men and just use vibrators, or they'll become addicted to them, or it's unnatural and there's some natural way of having sex, you know, all that stuff.
As a culture, we're still not fully comfy with women being sexually self-empowered, which is evident in the way vibrators are still sometimes talked about in media, in public health documentation, and even just privately in bedrooms around the world.
I've actually talked to many, many men about this, so I have a whole spiel I use.
This is Dr. Lori Mintz, an emeritus professor at the University of Florida, where she teaches the psychology of human sexuality to hundreds of students a year. She's also a licensed psychologist, a certified sex therapist, and the author of 2 books, one of which is especially relevant to what we're talking about today, Becoming Clitorate. It's a book that digs deep on one of the big themes of Dr. Mintz's work, the orgasm gap. The orgasm gap is the phenomenon where people with vulvas are consistently less likely to reach climax during partnered sex than people with penises, by a significant margin. And we call that margin the orgasm gap.
We know most women don't orgasm from intercourse, despite the myths and the misinformation and the images. And we know that, orgasm rates increase with clitoral stimulation.
Dr. Mintz co-authored a meta-analysis in 2020, which found that men tend to reach orgasm during sex about 80 to 90% of the time, while women only orgasm 49 to 65% of the time. Most of these studies are extremely heteronormative and cisnormative, so they're not telling the whole story, but they're still pretty damning. Different experts have different theories on why the orgasm gap exists, but many are in agreement we don't focus enough on clitoral pleasure as a culture, and it shows. It's too often presented as extra or additional, when for the majority of people with vulvas, it's absolutely required in order to reach orgasm.
I've seen that so many times, additional clitoral stimulation with or without a vibrator. And that's like saying, what most of us need to orgasm is just like icing on the cake. You can have the cake without the icing. It's the cake that's important. And I really do take issue with that idea of extra or additional, when for most of us, it is the main event.
Dr. Mintz's 2020 meta-analysis summed it up like this, quote, our cultural prioritization of penile vaginal intercourse over more clitorally focused sexual activities is linked to the gendered orgasm gap.
I'm curious to see what the newest numbers on the orgasm gap are, because I feel like the ones that I have at least are from, mid 2010s, where maybe we're hopefully making some shifts, making some progress here. I think that if culture and media and porn continue to shift and prioritize clitoral pleasure, then I do think that that will be mirrored in everyday relationships, and hopefully that's currently happening.
Funnily enough, when that right-wing blogger claimed that, quote, every feminist's ideal boyfriend is a magic wand, he may have been onto something, but not in the way he thought. The orgasm gap is a feminist issue, among other things, and many experts believe vibrators are a major potential solution.
Oh, I think they're central. I give lectures to lay people, other therapists, physicians, and I always talk about vibrators in terms of both empowering women to orgasm and closing the orgasm gap, because, we know from the research a lot of women don't have their first orgasm till they use a vibrator. We know that women who use vibrators have easier and more frequent orgasms.
Still, despite clitoral awareness being much higher now than it was a few decades ago, the myth persists that penetration alone should be enough to do the job. As Carol Queen puts it,
sex equals penetration, right? That's what so many people have heard or assume, have gotten the message somehow. Penetration is thought to be the same as sex. Sex is much broader, of course. I don't have to tell you this, but I'm just going to assure any of your listeners who ever wondered, I wonder if that's all there is to sex. No, many, 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 many things count as sex that are pleasurable, sexy, erotic, and maybe not to everyone, but maybe to you.
I think we've gotten a little better, but the amount of times I will watch a movie or TV show and see a woman fake an orgasm during missionary sex, and when there is no cunnilingus, and I know my boyfriend's probably sick of hearing me go, oh my God, only 25% of women would have had an orgasm then. And there was her vagina was so dry. Where was the lube? And I know it doesn't have to be 100% accuracy. It is fictionalized. But on the other hand, the message, and I remember internalizing this message that you're supposed to just kiss and it be passionate, and then you have penetrative sex and boom, you have an orgasm. And that's actually a really harmful message. And it's still you see more cunnilingus on screen and stuff like that, but still clitoral stimulation, absolutely, even though you see more of it on screen, totally undervalued.
The idea that penetration alone should be enough to bring a woman to orgasm has spread so far and wide that it can even affect how guys feel about themselves if their girlfriend or wife can't come from penetration, even though that's completely normal.
There's been studies that have come out since my book that really reinforce that men feel more masculine and achievement oriented if their partner orgasms through penetration. And then manual or oral are kind of next on the list, and low down is a vibrator. I say, look, you care so much about your partner's pleasure. That is so fabulous that, you really want her to have an orgasm. But you're kind of barking up the wrong tree, banging your head against, a wall, because you've been so duped and misguided by society that you think you have to do that with your penis. Here's what the science said. If you care, so let's take your caring to a level where you're implementing scientific advice, which is vibrators.
Now, look, am I saying vibrators can fix the patriarchy? Of course not. Am I saying the magic wand can give everyone an orgasm? Hell no. Everyone's body is different. But the wand's worldwide fame certainly seems to indicate that it's filling a hole in people's lives, so to speak. It's helping to bridge a gap, you could say. The orgasm gap.
I do think that we're making progress, right? I think slowly but surely, I think the word is getting out about women's pleasure and vibrators. I gave a talk for about 150 fraternity brothers. And I'm not kidding you. At the end of the lecture, they were asking me, where do I buy a vibrator? Can I like bring one to hookups? How do I do this? And I was like, yeah, here, get one. They were very interested in using vibrators once they understood the benefits to them and their partners. They get the clitoris seal of approval.
So now that I've fully outed myself as an angry feminist who wants to right the wrongs of the patriarchy with a vibrator in one hand and a microphone in the other, let's talk about some of the other reasons I find the magic wand so compelling as a cultural icon. A few years after I bought my first magic wand, I was in school to get my bachelor's degree in journalism, and I took a class called Advanced Feature Writing. Other kids pitched stories about politics, business, media. Me, I pitched a story about the magic wand, its history, its legacy, and its effect on its users' sex lives. Fortunately, my professor was unfazed, and he gave me the green light to start reaching out to potential interviewees right away. Some of them I just spoke to on the phone or interviewed them in their kitchens or on their living room sofas, but some of them, including some couples, let me into their bedrooms so I could observe how their wand usage fit into their sex and masturbation. I'd sit on a chair in the corner, my little reporter's notebook open on my lap, pen in hand, and I'd write down what I saw. And then we'd talk about it more afterward. Why did you reach for the wand at that particular moment? Or did it get in the way? What did it feel like when you came? And I'd see the love in their eyes get almost as bright when they talked about their wand as when they talked about their partner. One thing that surprised me again and again was how devoted some people were to their wand. As a sex toy reviewer, I'd rarely been loyal to particular toys in that way. If a vibe of mine died or got damaged, I'd just use a different one. But for a lot of these folks, that was unthinkable. The magic wand was their one true love in the sex toy realm. And that came up a lot in my interviews for this series, too.
It has such fantastic word of mouth.
I have a friend who works at a sex toy shop, and he tells me the story of people coming in with practically tears streaming down their face with a 15-year-old vibrator. Do you still make this?
Every time I turned to a person to sell them a magic wand or something else, unless they already knew all about it and the only reason they were in the store is that their magic wand had finally given up the ghost and they needed a new one immediately, please.
It's so fascinating. I mean, clearly it's such an iconic brand that everybody knows, and it's a fantastic fucking product.
I love that the magic wand is not only a sex toy, but a symbol. It's a symbol of sexual self-empowerment, of sex-positive feminism, of self-love. You don't need a magic wand to achieve these things, but for a lot of people, it sure helps. Its fame and its symbolic significance make it a great conversation starter, too. During the production of this series, I've acquired a magic wand tote bag, a bunch of magic wand enamel pins, even a cute pair of magic wand earrings, and it's astonishing the number of comments, eyebrow raises, and knowing glances I've received. Lots of people I interviewed had stories like this, too.
I was once walking through the Oakland airport and I wrote exhibitionism for the shy. I really have no shame. And so my magic wand was sticking out of my carry-on bag. And the guy at the Oakland check-in was like, what is this thing? And he was working with a woman who started laughing hysterically, which probably, she probably shouldn't have done that, but she did. And she was like, you don't know what that is. And one more working man got schooled about the magic wand that day. It was a great day.
In this series, we're going to talk about the history of the wand, how it came to be, and how it reached the status of being one of the most iconic sex toys in the world. We're going to talk about the magic wand's presence in porn, its usefulness in kink, and its surprising health benefits. We're going to talk about its impact on art, internet culture, the queer and trans community, and the disabled community. We're going to talk about its flaws as well as its strengths. I hope you'll join me on this journey of making magic with the magic wand.